It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is CEO Brett Beveridge. Brett is a serial entrepreneur who thrives on building businesses from the ground up and prides himself on being at the forefront of technology. Since founding the revenue optimization companies, or T-ROC, Brett has helped propel the parent company of 4 brands and an international division to become a leader in the wireless, electronic software, and retail industry space. Brett is an alum of the University of Miami and sits on the university's President's Council. Brett Beveridge, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today with you.
Great to have you here too. And Brett, we'd like to kind of get started to hear a little bit about the early years. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Sure, be happy to do that. So I'm a South Florida native. I was born and raised here in Miami and
Nice.
Grew up in kind of a middle-class lifestyle before cell phones and before the internet and before computers. So we really enjoyed a lot of being around friends and being outside all the time.
And peace and quiet.
Right. Well, we found our ways to find adventures and, swimming in canals and hanging out in the woods and playing lots of fun games in my youth. But it was a very, very pleasurable upbringing, and, I miss it.
Brothers and sisters growing up?
Sure. I have one brother.
Uh-huh.
He's older than I, and we hung out a lot together, but he had a similar feeling about our upbringing as well.
Yeah. Tell me about your parents. Professionals, stay at home? What were their
Sure.
respective
My
jobs?
mother was a stay-at-home mom, and my father had an early entrepreneurial stint in the 50s. He was with IBM out of college and went on his own to try an entrepreneurial venture that was a little bit before his time. So he ended up as a Allstate insurance agent selling insurance for the majority of his career.
What kind of influence did they have on your growing up? Any early lessons you remember back in those single-digit years?
Yeah, my father, I didn't recognize how much of an influence he had on my life. And I still, to this day, start to connect the dots with the type of influence he had on my life. He was a very supportive father. He always would say that we were going to do better than he did, that we're smarter than he ever was, when in fact he was a pretty damn smart guy in his own right. He taught us how to respect elders, but that we also need to be confident in who we are. And in fact, I remember several occasions where we would be in the neighborhood, and if we got in any kind of trouble at all, he would say, just tell those parents to speak to me directly. So it gave me a lot of confidence that I was absolutely going to respect the elder. Yeah, but he had my back at all times. So he taught me how to be independent, proud, and don't rely too much on others if you want to get what you want out of life.
Nice. And what about mom?
Mom was fantastic. She is more conservative than my father. My father was more of an optimist, and my mother was more of get a stable hourly job and keep that job for 40 years and you'll make me a very happy mother.
A good balance between the two, right? Kind of had
Definitely
the entrepreneurial side and the steady state side. Any other early influencers in your life? Coaches, teachers, people you remember from those early years?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I really enjoyed people. So my friends obviously would influence me. I had a strong desire I was on a pretty strict allowance. So I got pretty much lunch money, and that was what I was able to show as my allowance for the week. So at an early age, wanted to do other things to generate some cash so that I could buy some of the things that I wanted to buy. But very, I would say very average upbringing when it comes to how and what I was dealing with as a kid.
Middle class.
Total middle class, yeah.
Were you a good student, Brett?
It wasn't really hard for me to go through school. I was able to get by, unlike today, when from very early ages, kids are put under tremendous pressure to do well. It really is crazy. I have 3 daughters, and having and seeing them go through that journey was crazy. But
are they college age now, or still in high school, or where are they in their path?
I actually have one that graduated from Florida State and got her master's at University of Miami, and now she is a practicing mental health counselor.
Oh, cool.
And my middle daughter went to USC, graduated in May of last year, and she has her dream to be an actress. So
Nice.
She's living in LA, pursuing that dream. And then my youngest daughter is 18, has just graduated high school, and she's on her way to UT Austin for her college career.
So you just recently gone through the whole college app process, and how brutal that is.
It really is brutal. I mean, the tens of thousands of students that apply for 1,000 openings is just crazy.
Yeah, our daughter went through that last year, and I am so glad she's our youngest, because I don't think I could live through it again.
Right. I hear you.
So back to kind of your school times, anything that was, kind of interesting outside of class, sports, music, theater, what other types of things were you involved with extracurricularly?
Well, as in high school, I was an athletic guy, and I loved athletic sports. However, my parents were pretty strict about that. They did not, fast forward to today, what you're seeing happening in the NFL and various sports, I think they were nervous and concerned that, I would have injuries that I would live with for the rest of my life. So I did play some Pop Warner ball, and I wrestled in high school, but most of my time was spent basically working. I had tons of outside jobs, one at a time, of course, but I mowed yards at 9 years old to earn extra cash, and then I bussed tables and was a short order cook and was a cashier in a grocery store and waited and bussed tables.
That's
until
great.
I went to college.
So first job was lawn mowing, or did you do the ubiquitous paper route as well as an early kid?
No, I didn't do the paper route. I was 9 years old when I started
That's
kind of a
young.
lawn route.
Yeah.
A lawn route is what I had.
Right. And grass grows fast in Florida, right? That's a
week.
good profession. Yeah, every week. Cool. And was the spending money, kind of yours to keep? Did mom and dad encourage you to save, give away charitably? How did that kind of work for you at home?
That's a great question. So the answer is, my dad had my brother and I read a book that I highly recommend, that is a very simple book to understand, and it's for all ages, and it's called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Oh,
have you heard of that book?
I have. Yes, in fact, read it as well. Yeah.
It's a super book with a very simple principle of save 10% of whatever you earn and pay yourself first. So he did absolutely ask us, or kind of didn't really have the option to not read it one summer, but that has stuck with me, and I recommend that book to all ages to this day.
What were some of the key memories or things that you recall from that book, other than the 10% rule?
You just have to pay yourself first. And if the beauty of compounding interest and compounding principal over a long period of time, and the framework around how you can set yourself up so that you don't penetrate that life savings bucket, and you end up living within your means, because you know that you have basically 10% less to live on than you would have otherwise.
Right.
So it just gives you general disciplines around respecting money and respecting compounding interest, but also how to live within your means.
Awesome. And what did you typically spend your the money that was discretionary, I guess, over those years? Did you have certain hobbies or things that you indulged yourself with growing up in Florida?
Well, I did. I mean, I was outside all the time, but there was one kind of phase down here in South Florida, and probably throughout the United States in the 70s, which was roller skating and roller skating rinks. So my 9-year-old income through 13 was spent on buying really great kangaroo skin, blue spruce wheel roller skates, speed skates, that I could compete in speed skating at the local roller rink.
So you had a roller rink. Oh, that's cool. So it wasn't just outside.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I suppose, given probably the conditions down there, particularly during the summer, you'd wanted to be inside an air-conditioned space.
No, for sure. And we're coming upon those times right now in May, June, and July.
Exactly. So jobs in college, did you also have, have to work while you were going to school? Was tuition kind of something you saved for? Mom and dad supported you, financial aid? How did you kind of make college work?
So I worked through high school, and my dad asked me to save as much money as I could in the period between graduation of high school and my first year of college. So I saved as much as I could, and he matched that. And he did pay my tuition and books and living expenses for year number one. Year number 2 through 6, by the way, for a 4-year degree.
Let's see, how's the math work on that? Oh, I know how that works.
Right. I had moved out. I went away to school for 1 year. I graduated high school without even applying to college. I don't know what I was thinking. I ended up going to the community college up in Tallahassee because my girlfriend was at Florida State up there at the time. So I went there my first year and then came back to Miami and worked my way through, putting myself through school and my living expenses. So yes, I was bartending, I was waiting tables, I was bouncing, I was sometimes picking papaya in the fields to supplement my income. But the best job I actually ever had that taught me the most was working in the health club industry. While I was going to school full time, I started as a salesperson and moved my way up into an assistant manager, and then the center manager with a fairly large sales team and a pretty high quota to hit. And that taught me a lot about how to sell. It taught me a lot about how to manage at an early age. It was very lucrative, so I was able to, get some footing under me, and it was a fantastic experience while I was still in college.
Was college kind of optional for you? It sounds like, Dad helped with the beginning years, but it was kind of like, hey, if you want to do this, you've got to invest in it. Was it one of those kind of conversations?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation and the hope and the prayers were that I would make it through college.
Dad did. Did Mom have a degree as well?
Mom did not. Mom actually worked at the University of Miami where I went to school, which did afford me some nice discounts on tuition.
Oh, that's cool.
And she took a lot of classes, but never got a formal degree. My father did also go to University of Miami, as did my brother and my wife, by the way. All of us graduated from there.
Big alum.
Yeah. But it came to a point where, I was in the early years of college, I was less than focused. I mean, it was about, having fun and partying, to be honest with you.
Figuring it out. Yeah.
Once I got that job at Scandinavian and started to understand what life was about, and knew that I needed to get focused and real, I decided to get the degree. I wanted the piece of paper, even though I was working 50 hours a week. I still knew I needed to get that diploma.
And how did you pick the major or the degree that you chose?
I'm a extroverted person just by nature, and marketing appealed to me. Marketing was easy for me with a business minor. So I picked marketing for that reason, and it was easy for me to get through that way. Easier anyway.
And so once you got to Miami, finished up your degree, what was that first job you took right out of college?
Well, my first career, while I was in college, I started my first business, which was called Let's Talk Cellular and Wireless. In fact, the original company name was called Celco Cellular, a division of Cellular Communications Network Inc. And our slogan was, "We're mobile because you are." Well, we knew we needed to sound big, hence the name, but we were mobile because that we didn't have an office. We had a van that we customized, and
I love
we'd run around Miami, and we would drive to parking lots of banks and shopping centers, anywhere where there was traffic, and whip out our demo mobile cellular phones, which at the time was going to be a fantastic and big craze.
Right.
And we saw early success and ended up growing that company through gas station card funding and angel investing and bank debt and eventual venture capital, and took that company public and eventually sold that to Nextel. We had about 300 stores across the country and over 1,000 employees when we sold it.
So it was primarily a retail operation of cellular phones.
Specialty retailer, correct.
Retail. Yeah, and then it's and how long were you involved in that venture until you sold it?
Started that in February of 1989, and we took it public in 1997 with Merrill Lynch and Smith Barney, and then sold it in 2000 2001 to Nextel Communications.
Right
in
before
between
the fall.
Well, yeah. Well, in between that time, after we took it public, I left to go start a separate .com company out in Silicon Valley. So I would travel every Monday morning to San Francisco and take the red eye back every Friday night. And we raised a lot of money for that entity, which eventually became the leader in the online wireless phone sales. Yeah.
Right. Gosh, cool. And so tell us about some of the, early leadership responsibility. You obviously were hiring people, and did you have a partner in that business?
In the first business I did, yeah, someone I met in college in one of my classes and recruited him to come work for me at the health club that I was managing. And from there, he left and went to go sell cell phones, and we collaborated and said, let's go do this.
Yeah. So you went from kind of just the two of you to how many employees before you actually sold or went public?
We had about 1,400 employees. We were in 34 states and Puerto Rico. We were doing close to $300 million in revenue with that first company. Yeah.
And so, some of the early management experiences, maybe you can share a little bit about that, because you were kind of a first-time manager, right, through that role?
Yeah, I definitely was. I mean, Scandinavian was my first kind of experience managing a team of 15 or so people. And what I learned from that translated very easily into, the next career, which was really starting from scratch and then growing it to be a larger company. But I was always the youngest guy in the room at the time. Now I'm always the oldest guy in the room.
It's funny how chronology kind of catches up with you after a while, right?
It's true, but I will tell you that just if you perform, age is invisible. It really is invisible. And if you are leading the way and leading by example, and you are absolutely respecting your team around you, and you're listening to what they have to say and their opinions, you understand what motivates them, and you treat them with a whole bunch of respect and know that there's a unified goal that you have to hit. That's has been my formula and my style over the years, and I've seen some success with it.
Do you think having a passion about what you do makes a difference as a leader?
Absolutely I do. I mean, I never set out to sell cell phones. And it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I just have to sell cell phones. But you have to also keep an open mind and find passion in what you do. Absolutely loving what you do, that you hear everyone say is mission critical. When you are involved with something like that, you are not forced to go to work. You are excited to think about next steps. You're excited to grow and to be the best that you can be. So you absolutely have to love what you're doing in order to find real success and happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, you really haven't had a boss, right? Or back in those early days of Scandinavian, I guess you did, correct?
Yeah, her name is Maria Beveridge.
Okay, got that right. Tell us about some of the lessons that Maria has told you over the years.
Well, that might be a different kind of podcast. We might be on a mental counseling podcast of some sort. No, kidding. But
has she been a partner though with you in some of these businesses?
She's not a physical partner, but she's absolutely thankfully chosen to be a stay-at-home mom as well, which afforded me the ability to be on the road as much as I have been and have us kind of divide and conquer and be able to make the life that we're trying to lead. But back to your question around no boss. I mean, yes, I'm my own boss and I have been my own boss, but you definitely have constituencies out there that are influencing what you're doing. When you're a public company,
stakeholders, board members,
absolutely, banks, stakeholders, board members, shareholders, employees are my boss as well. I mean, I'm here to serve them and make sure I'm giving them all the resources and everything that they possibly can need to be successful, and allowing them to be accountable and feel ownership in what they're doing. So you always have, there are bosses everywhere. It just is how you embrace each of those constituencies.
Well, talk to us a little bit, Brett, about particularly the concept of the stakeholder, the board, the bankers. What did you learn from those relationships, particularly in terms of managing them? Many of our listeners do have entrepreneurial interests, so we've spoken to a number of entrepreneurs, but we've never really kind of pursued that area. So I'd love to hear your feedback on, how do you work with those types of folks who, have a stake in what you do, both either financially or maybe ethically, morally, et cetera?
Well, for internal purposes, you need to have a very strong culture when you're dealing with your employees. And I don't know if you want to get into that now or later, but culture is absolutely mission critical, and I would love to expand on that at some point. But each all those different constituencies, you're kind of in a goldfish bowl, particularly when you are in a public company. But communication is the overriding key to all those different constituencies. You absolutely have to over communicate, restate what it is that you're trying to accomplish. People have, distractions. So them being very clear on what the objective is, making sure you're communicating not only in the bad times when you have to communicate, but in the good times. You want your bankers, you want your board members, you want your shareholders to have a really good view of what you're doing right, and when you encounter challenges, that you are not hiding those challenges or sugarcoating those challenges, particularly with banks.
Transparency.
Banks, absolute transparency. Meet with your banks every quarter at worst case scenario. Share what you plan to have happen and what actually happened, so that when you do have a challenging time, they're not new to your business. They trust you, which is absolute key, is trust amongst all those different constituencies. And you also don't want the bank to say at the end of the year when you're looking for your next round of funding to say, well, if you just would have done this last year, we could have approved you. So I remove that from the conversation. I say, look, I'm going to come to you looking for more money at the end of the year. Tell me now what we need to do so that you don't say, if you would have done this, you would have gotten that
very
extra
proactive.
Huh? Proactive.
Yeah.
Good point.
And thinking about a board, did you actually build a board with that first company then? You had to, of course, prior to going public, and sure had one afterwards. And was it mostly composed of investors? Was it friends and family, mentors? How did you go about selecting the folks that provided that kind of advice and counsel?
That's another great question. So an early investor, our first angel investor, was a fantastic, seasoned, talented business person. So we insisted that he be on our board. My partner and I were on the board. Our venture capital investor obviously had seats on the board consistent with their ownership in the company at various stages of their investment. And then we had a one or two outside board members that brought different disciplines to the board that we needed to complement and round out our strategy and our board, as well as our management team. So we would mutually agree on those incremental board members as they came in.
Got it. Cool. And so maybe just giving us a little bit of chronology as it relates to your career. You sold the company, it went public, obviously you sold it, and and I love the name, by the way. We talked about this prior to the podcast, T-ROC. What a wonderful name, the revenue optimization companies. Now, did that evolve out? Was that something you started up following, or was there something in between?
So when we sold the public company to Nextel, I was reluctant to join. So I stayed on as a consultant, but eventually joined the company to help them grow the number of locations that they bought from us. In fact, they bought a little over 200 locations of our 300. The rest were sold to AT&T and others. And we
this
grew
is early
that
2000, right? 2001.
2001. We grew that base. We opened 800 additional stores in 3 years. And then I also ran the national retail division, which were relationships with the big box retailers like Best Buy and Walmart and Target and back then CompUSA and others. So when Nextel sold to Sprint, I was offered a position, but by that time I was so eager to get back into the entrepreneurial world that I took a package and eventually consulted with Sprint Nextel to help them integrate the companies. But that's when I had the idea to start what now has become T-ROC. And it started with a company called the Retail Outsource, TRO. And we eventually grew to T-ROC because it was the retail outsource companies. And then we said, you know what, that's not really what we do. And so that evolved into the revenue optimization companies, but we like to just be known as T-ROC for the reasons that you mentioned. But I noticed that wherever there was technology involved at retail, whenever customers were trying to buy technology at retail, big box retailers and carriers and others were really not good at doing it at all. If you walk into, you can think of the big box retailer, they're really good at selling toothpaste and toilet paper, commodity type items, but they're not good at prescribing solutions that help a customer identify a phone or the accessories or the rate plans and make sure that they have a working device when they leave, and they understand their bill when it comes, and being able to deal with personal information and all of that. So that's what started the retail outsource. And our first project was for the Home Depot, as they were trying to expand their brand from just selling kind of tools and deck boards and hammers and nails to how can technology make people's lives better, smarter, faster. So that was our first project, and it kind of evolved from there, and the number of offerings and companies that we have included under the T-ROC umbrella evolved as well.
And privately owned and planning to stay that way, or is this another company you're building for an eventual IPO or perhaps sale?
The options are open. It is privately held today. There are no outside investors at all, and that's intentional. We are obviously approached often, especially in today's world where there's lots of money on the sideline for investment.
Way too much money chasing too few opportunities. Too few good opportunities anyway, right?
Yeah, you're right. But we have been able to grow extremely rapidly without having to bring in outside investors. We want to stay focused. We want to keep to our plan, and sometimes bringing in outside investment can derail plans. So it's becoming meaningful enough now, and over the next year or two, that as we're cementing our go-to-market strategies and growing more rapidly, that an investment in the future is on the table.
Awesome. And solely owned, or do you have a partner also in this business? How are you structured?
No, I own 100% of the company, and that's an interesting topic, just because if you own 100% of the company, how are you motivating your top rank leadership and middle leadership? When you are a private company, owning stock in it or stock options in it doesn't really matter. It just becomes kind of a distraction. It's not real. On paper, it might sound good, but in reality, it doesn't do any good until there's some type of event. Correct. So what I do now is we build budgets and share profits so that every year they're able to enjoy, as an entrepreneur does, when you're doing well, and they are sad like I am sad when we don't do well.
Right.
So you're aligned in what you're doing. Obviously, if there becomes some kind of liquidity event, that is when you would allow them to be vested based on their time and performance and level, and take out some ownership at that point.
Nice structure. I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier, because we do want to talk on it, and that's kind of your thoughts around building a company culture and the importance of that.
Every company has a culture, as you know, and you deal with this on a daily basis, and you talk to a lot of executives and people who are coming from many different environments. So there is a corporate culture, whether you like it or not. I have always felt that I've had a similar corporate culture to what we have today, but it was never written. It was almost unconscious, right? It was almost based on actions and based on treatment than it was formal. With this set of companies, T-ROC, we are religious, and I don't mean in a church or cult type of way, but we're religious about having written cultural values and
mission
statement,
value statements. How do you? What's that look like for you?
So these I'll just name the value statements quickly, and we can go into them if you like or not. But the first is be an entrepreneur every day. We want our people to think out of the box. We want them to think about how they can solve problems that seem impossible. We want to challenge the status quo, so they're not doing things just because they're told to, even though they think they're not the right thing to do or the smart thing to do. So be an entrepreneur every day. We want you to embrace change and embrace learning. There's no such thing as autopilot. You can't set it and forget it anywhere, but particularly in our world. Make honesty and integrity win every time, every day. All of our employees, we'll have 4,000 to 5,000 W-2 employees over the next couple of months as we finish the completion of one of our expansions. And they are facing situations every day where they need to choose honesty and integrity. So it's a non-negotiable. It's the cornerstone of everything we do. They see decisions and choices being made every day that validate and back that up.
Full transparency. Are you kind of what they call an open book organization as well? People have an opportunity to kind of know how you're doing financially and share that with them?
We have quarterly all hands meetings that are broadcast. And in those meetings, we give updates on where we stand against budget and what our challenges are, what our successes are, what's coming down the road for them. And the attendance on those things, you have to really make them entertaining. The lion's share of our employees are millennials. And so which we can talk about as well, we absolutely embraced that. And how can we best communicate with how they like to be spoken with and communicated with? So, yeah, we
How many
absolutely believe
total
in
employees now across all the companies, both domestic and international?
it. But let's just say by October it'll be a little over 5,000.
And that's, that the bigger it gets, the harder it is to kind of keep that culture in check. Don't you agree?
Couldn't agree more. One of the non-negotiables for me is avoiding politics and avoiding bureaucracy and avoiding silos at all cost. We absolutely have all come from environments where all of those ingredients are there. And, we can choose because we're a private company and because we have, leadership that doesn't want that sort of behavior or that sort of morale in the office to choose not to be siloed or to have politics in the business. So we're absolutely maniacal about keeping that out of the business.
You said that you have a lot of millennials, and everyone knows how hard it is to attract, let alone retain them. What would you say is kind of the big wow about T-ROC, and what is it that you do that keeps it that way?
I would tell you that we are a company that promotes from within anytime and anywhere that we can.
Right.
So we love, and I think we did this over 300 times, 300 internal promotions last year, and it'll be over 1,000 internal promotions this year.
Fantastic.
The only reason we don't exclusively promote from within is when we just don't have enough bodies. We're hiring and hiring and hiring, so we have to bring in people from the outside to help support our programs. We are a performance-based business, so that's pillar number 2. We have to absolutely perform, and those who are putting themselves in a position to be promoted through being an excellent team member and meeting their minimum requirements for employment, like showing up on time and being in uniform and producing at least a minimum level and being a certain amount of time with us will allow them to be promoted, and that's based on performance. And the third is we amaze our customers, which, by the way, is also one of our core values that we didn't get to. We are absolutely obsessed and cherish our relationships with the types of companies that are customers of ours. So we do everything in our power to give them more than they expect and to amaze them as well as their customers.
So, you've been in business now, what, 8 years? Tell me again when T-ROC was originally founded. When TRO was founded, I guess, right? Because it's evolved.
Yeah, 2007, January 2007.
So about 10, 11 years. You've obviously had people come and go over the years. What is it that you think, is the fact that keeps people there? In other words, what's kind of that area about your culture that, really retains and keeps people coming back or staying with you?
And it is both, by the way. We have people that come to us, stay with us, and then leave and do come back. We are really open about that, by the way, particularly when a lot of these employees that we're bringing on are entry level or first time employees. So we understand that and embrace and want them to understand and embrace the fact that they're going to come in here and whatever they give us, we're going to give them more in return. So if they put in the effort and they put their hearts into it, we're going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to make them better people. Better, not just better salespeople or better managers, but just better people. So when they do go to their next career, we're not upset about that. We're congratulatory about that and want them to feel that this was a great experience and that it helped build their foundation to go off and do other things. And that, by the way, makes them want to come back when they go out into the real world and they see that it's not as open and not as entrepreneurial and not as people-driven as we are, and they end up coming back for that. I'll tell you another way to deal with millennials, and I love this, is reverse mentoring. So, you ask, how do I manage? We can get into that, but reverse mentoring is a cornerstone of my style. Understanding and listening to the various, people that are working with you at all ages and shapes and sizes allows you to learn a lot more. So I don't know at all by far. I'm learning every single day. Having different genders and demographics and ages and all of that, spend time with me and teach me really helps us with shortcuts in the future on how to be relevant and how to attract the right people and perform well.
I like that, Brett. It's almost like humility or vulnerability, right? You're in a position where you say, look, I don't know everything. I don't need to be the smartest man in the room. What can you tell me about what you know? Is that kind of the approach you take?
Absolutely. And that absolutely, it's not a me higher than you. We don't level. We don't like leveling. We don't like the word leveling. Everyone has a highest and best use, and mine is to do one thing, and the finance department's highest and best use is to make sure that we have accurate reporting, and the marketing's highest and best use is to make sure we're promoting our business and IT, et cetera, recruiting through the front lines. And we embrace whether you are on the front lines, which is where the register is and what pays the bills, all the way through to my office. We're treating each other with lots of respect and lots of open ears and listening.
Kind of goes back to some of that servant leadership you were talking about earlier as well.
I hope so. I hope that's how our people feel. I think they do.
You said you're doing a lot of hiring. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in?
So again, it depends on the role, but absolutely wide eyes, white teeth, smiles, seeing the whites of the teeth, energetic, ambitious, want to move in the world, want to make a difference, want to rule the world in some cases. I love it when people say they want my job one day, and we get into details on how do they feel like they can do that, but it's more around attitude, energy, optimism, and ambition.
Do you get involved in a lot of the interviewing beyond, obviously, direct reports?
I don't get involved at the front line level. I'm very in tune with how many people we have. By the way, we'll have close to 60 recruiters full-time, between full-time and some contract base over the next couple of weeks.
Internal?
We'll have about 45 internal and 15 external that we engage regularly that know our company well, so that we can ebb and flow as projects, as new additional projects come. But I'm very in tune with and invest lots of dollars into personality indexing and identifying who our A, B, and C players are. We just engaged a company now that I'm really excited about. It was well into the six-figure investment to use facial recognition and voice recognition so that when you're video interviewing people, you can truly understand based on their expressions, based on their eyes, based on their voice tones, how they would fit in your organization.
Level of intensity and fit, et cetera. Yeah, cool.
I learn the most when I'm in the field and I'm visiting our projects and I'm speaking one-on-one to the front lines and the middle management. That's how I get the most out of my visits, and I'm able to help influence giving them additional resources that they need to perform.
Now, you said you have a pretty flat organization, but do you have kind of at least an executive team kind of structure where you've got 5 or 6 direct reports, or how do you kind of, manage the various brands and operations you have from your desk?
First, we talked about the 3 pillars of performance-based and, those 3 categories of amazing our customers, et cetera. Our 4 kind of operational pillars are: 1, stay lean, stay flat. We want to stay close to the business and make sure we understand what's happening and not have layers that are unnecessary. 2 is we want to invest in technology heavily so that we can stay flat. So we're always investing in technology solutions that help us automate processes and gain more insights and business intelligence as to what's happening in the field. And the 3rd is invest in people. So we invest heavily in training and development and providing benefits that our employees can enjoy, that makes them want to, again, to your point earlier, stay.
Well, Brett Beveridge, you've been very, very generous with your time. We appreciate that. We've got one question we always ask all our CEOs, and that's kind of what career and life advice would you give to someone that's got their eyes on the corner office, or like you, wants to be an entrepreneur and build their own company?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's absolutely to find something that you love. You have to make a decision early on. You have to ask yourself what you really, really want out of life first. Whether you are entering the workforce, whether you might have 5 or 10 years experience, It might be you might be in your mid 30s or early 40s and have 10 or 15 years with a traditional corporation, or you might be retired and looking to see what's next for your next chapter of your life. But I will tell you, particularly for the younger constituency, you have to understand what you want and understand how you're going to get what you want. It's a tough road to be an entrepreneur. It is uncertain. You're going to have people telling you what not to do, that you can't do things, that you're crazy to leave a stable job or to choose an entrepreneurial lifestyle over a stable lifestyle. But I will tell you that there is no better feeling than starting something from scratch and gaining momentum with a team of people around you that believe in the same purpose and goal you do, and that together you're building something special, something that is solving a problem, something that's changing the world. So if you choose that, just understand that you're going to have some uncertainty along the way. But if I can do it, a guy that lived in a trailer with no hot water, that had to use the shower next door that had hot water, and turn that into a stream of fairly successful companies over time, then absolutely the people out there can do it. They just have to embrace it and go for it.
Well, Brett, thank you again for your time. Best of luck as you continue to grow T-ROC globally, and we look forward to maybe having a future podcast to hear about your future growth and development.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.